All right, welcome you guys. Today we're talking about triggers and the truth behind triggers because I think most of us, we get triggers and we just freaking spiral. We are so locked into being right about this trigger and defending all of our positions that it never gets us where we want to go. It's like this constant resistance in our soul that's just like, I don't like that thing. And we don't take the time to dissect it and say, why were you so triggered by that thing? Right? Like we've talked about this in other episodes is like, okay, so there's lots of crimes in the world. There's all sorts of horrible things that happen. How come you're not triggered about those things? So if you're so justified in this trigger, like why is it that this particular thing triggers you and that other stuff doesn't? That's where all the juice is. So I want to talk today about like digging in and just dissecting triggers and finding out what's really going on there. But I think also it's going to be helpful. I would like for us to talk about some of our triggers or some examples of triggers that we've had. So what comes to mind for you, Elle?
Well,
In
and
that
I
regard?
get, yeah. And so let me just, I guess I would say for people, a trigger is anything that makes you feel emotionally uncomfortable.
Right.
Now, there can be a positive trigger. Like if you get triggered by a personality of someone because it's someone that is similar to a personality that's not good, then that's a positive trigger that's triggering your gut to go, ooh, I don't feel good here. But then there's the others that we get triggered by, and it's stuff we gotta it's stuff we got to work on, right? One of the triggers I had for a long time, and people have heard me talk about this before, and if not, you can go back. Is I had so much shame about having this physical disability that I have in my hands, and I had so much shame about it. So, because I had because I was on, like long-term disability and quote, didn't have to work really at the time. Anytime someone would make a comment, like I would be like, oh, you should read this article. And someone might just be like, yeah, well, some of us have to work. Now, they didn't mean it towards me. I took it personally. I would
Right.
take it so personally. I'd get so triggered because I'd be like, because I had still this shame and this weirdness about this thing over here. And until I kind of got through that and got over the shame of that, I don't really get triggered by it. And so again,
Right.
you might get a small trigger. Someone might say something to you, but here's where you're not in a triggered state. So let's say you're like, I want to get a job doing that. And you're like, I don't think you have the credentials for that, like, or the experience. Now I could get triggered by that and feel less than, and then I really am in a triggered state. But if I have the thought of like, you're an idiot, I don't care. Of course I do. Whatever. Then, okay. Then it was just like a temporary downer. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you weren't staying there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing in both of those is like an insecurity that got identified in you, right?
100%.
So it's like I already feel insecure about this area. So
Yep.
when somebody else reflects that back to me, that freaking hurts. And what do we do when somebody's like we feel like someone's coming at us? We deflect. And we say, oh my gosh, that's their problem. I can't believe they said that, blah, blah, blah. Whereas if you didn't have insecurity in that area, like I'll fully admit, I don't feel like I have any insecurities about my body. I've worked really hard for that. And so when
Yeah.
people say stuff about my body, I'm like, oh, okay, that's your perception. It's not my perception.
Because you feel good now.
Right. I'm like, yeah, I don't need your opinion. Like I like my opinion on this topic, right? And so I think that's a big reason for a lot of our triggers is insecurity because there's a difference between a trigger and an awareness, right? Like for example, I was in a relationship with a very, very, very unhealthy, mentally unhealthy person. And when I would see those qualities in other people when I was dating again, I was like, whoa, like wall goes up. Oh my gosh, he's a psycho. He's a narcissist. Run. Like what a freaking creep, like just all this stuff. And then I realized like, as I've gone through my healing journey and actually he's not the big bad guy anymore. He's just a person that has some mental health issues. It's not, I'm not a victim in that situation. Now, when I see those, I'm like, got it. Okay. That's where that guy's at. Like, I get it, and it's not this like, oh my gosh, like major freaking fear response, attack, go on attack because I feel attacked. It's like, oh, okay. Like I see where he's at, like noted, and that's the difference, I think, between an awareness and a trigger. When there's a trigger, there's some juiciness there. There's
Really good stuff.
there's something for you to work on. So, I guess I'll share the first step I feel like to
Well,
getting
actually,
it.
tell us about well, I know the body thing from the past, but was there another trigger? Are there triggers from the past that you had to clean up that are?
Yeah. Examples. I mean,
Well, you had one you shared not too long ago where, you had expressed being molested during your life and you didn't tell your ex-husband. And so
Mm-hmm.
that if he said, I love you during, you got triggered
Yeah,
by that.
exactly. Because I hadn't healed
You
from
hadn't
that
healed
thing.
it.
So the person who molested me would say they loved me when they were molesting me. So because I hadn't dealt with it at all, I was fine, which is the absence of emotion. It's literally anytime you're fine, you're denying everything. Like that should be an awareness. Wait, why am I saying I'm fine? What am I actually feeling? Because I was so fine and so like totally didn't matter. I hadn't processed any of those emotions. And so when now I'm married and it's supposed to be the most, intimate moment that there is, and I'm getting triggered into like repulsion because my husband is telling me he loves me because I haven't dealt with my own shit, right? So that's the sadness of it too, is that like we block healthy relationships because we haven't dealt with our own shit, right? Somebody might be like, I mean, that's a great example. My husband at the time wasn't doing it. He was doing something beautiful. He was just being kind. He had pure love and affection, but I couldn't receive it. I was blocking it because of my own lack of processing. So it's like we're really doing ourselves a huge disservice by not looking at these things and saying, why did that trigger me? What is going on? Acknowledging that you even are triggered.
And it could be something like seemingly minor. One that I remember from a coaching client a while back is she, when we dug back, we realized that like in high school, her friends, like she'd meet some friends and then they'd all like become friends and then they'd like bail on her. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So she was very like triggered by if two of her friends then in the future would like, oh yeah, we should it would be like, oh my God, no, I can't. Right.
Yep.
And I was like, why is this,
Security.
why is this happening? And we dug back and like, you can see that she was triggered. Or for example, let's say you were raised and you had to be like the person in charge of everything and you were responsible for everything because your parents weren't around and you're like raising your, little sister or whatever it is. I think it was Bob Proctor who talked about this in his audiobook that I was re-listening to because of you recently. And it was this example where then when people didn't need her, it was like, or they were unavailable, like, oh no, I'm good. She got triggered because any kind of unavailability would trigger her,
Right. So it's like triggers are a lack of our own emotional processing. It's like we haven't emotionally processed all the way. And that's why, so in my coaching, I take people through the process. It's a long process. It's 37 questions long of emotional processing for triggers. And I ask them to do it every day. It will change your life. If you can admit, the first step is admitting that you were triggered, right? Because we like to go down this funnel of like, no, I'm just right. Like, no, I just have an opinion. Like, that's just how it is. It's like, no, you got triggered. You are feeling a strong emotional response. That's a trigger. And the next thing to identify, I think that's so important, is what are you actually feeling right now? What is the emotion? Are you feeling angry? Well, what's at the core of that? Because we all know that anger is a secondary emotion. So are you feeling sad? Are you feeling fearful? Are you feeling hurt?
Rejected?
Are you feeling betrayed? Yeah, like what is the core feeling there? What are you feeling really, right? And allowing ourselves, it's like, that's why I like my clients to write it down, right? Like write it, because otherwise we're just like, we won't do the work. Next is, what's the story you've created? Because every time there's a trigger, there's a story, right? Like your friend is like, people always do this to me. People always do this to me. Or for mine, it's like, it's gross when my husband says I love you, or whatever it is. It's like there's a story that you've created in your head around that thing. Or maybe I'm around another guy that's showing like what I perceive as narcissistic traits. I'm like, oh, he's a narcissist. Knew it, because I haven't healed my own stuff from previous relationships.
And you're proving yourself right in that moment about that thing. Or again, a common one is like, let's say there's been betrayal in a relationship, like you've been cheated on a few times, or someone was living a double life or whatever, and then someone like in a relationship innocently lies because they were getting you a present and they lied about being somewhere else, and now you're triggered and you're like, this person is a liar.
Exactly. It's like we all humans, every single one of us likes confirmation bias. So we want to get new evidence of our existing theories and beliefs. And we look for it all over the place. Yep. And so when those existing theories and beliefs tend to bring you anger, resentment, sadness, loneliness, all of those things, man, we have such a responsibility to ourselves to dig deeper on those things. Why won't we do it? Why would we just stay in that belief? Because we're protecting ourselves with it. And a lot of it, I'm harsh on the victim mindset stuff because I was in that. I didn't know I was in a victim mindset. I was like, oh yeah, I hate when people are victims. I was doing it all over the place. Like, and so for me, it's like when you constantly have to be right about in a situation that you haven't emotionally processed, you're actually being a victim because they're trying to say, yeah, it wasn't my fault because people always do this. Someone else always does this. Other people are like this. And that's why I'm triggered. Nope.
And avoiding personal responsibility for that manifestation, for that energy, and for that story continually perpetuating in your life. And there's a way to stop it and rewire and turn around.
Yeah. And it just takes a little bit of work. Like this process.
Yeah, let's get into it.
I can do it in like 10 minutes. So I narrowed it down to 10. Okay. So
10 out of the 30 something questions.
Yeah, 10 out of 37. So these are the highlights, right? So we've got to the story. So we've acknowledged that we're triggered, right? That's the first step. And then we've identified what we're feeling and we're being honest with ourselves and we're digging deeper. Don't just say one word, get like 4. And what's the story you created? And then what do you really want to say? This is a thing. Like, let's say that in this conversation, I said something that just kind of bugged you, right? Like maybe I was like, yeah, because Elle's hair always has to look like Malibu Barbie or something. You know, I love her hair so much. I'm like, you're so
I'd be like, I'll take it. That's a compliment.
But let's say I said it like all annoying like that.
Right.
Or some sort of like underhanded, bitchy comment. And like at the end of the conversation, it's like you noticed it and it kind of triggered you because you're like, that was off. But then you never really think in your head all the way what you want to say, right? This is what we do, right? So we're like...
I mean, what I want to say in terms of what I would say to you about that?
Yeah, what you're really feeling. Like, wow, Tara, I didn't know that you actually like had jealousy issues and clearly you're insecure about your own hair. Like all these, because we're so woke and conscious and evolved that we're not supposed to say things like that. Those things are not nice and those things are beneath us. So we won't allow ourselves to go there, even though they're freaking in there. They're freaking in there. So take a private moment with yourself and just release it all. Just release all these, like all the things, like what I really think about you in that moment, what I think about what you said, what I want to tell you, like get all ugly because then it's released. We have to let that crap out.
And sometimes you got to say it to the person. It depends. If you're close with someone, like for example, one of my best friends of all time had triggered me by being kind of a downer on a thing, and I read about it in my book. And I called it out right then and there because we have that relationship, but also because, well, we never get into these things, and I knew that if I didn't say something about his comment, that it would fester and then create this thing that would really be a detriment to our 30-year best friend relationship, where we have had like 2 moments of like a 2-second, and then we're off, because like I don't get into fights with friends. And so I just call him. I go, hey, you know what, dude, you're kind of a downer. It's being a freaking downer right now, man. I didn't like the way you just said that. Like, dude, that's not cool. And he was just like, oh my God, hey, like, shit, you're right. I'm sorry, my bad. And it's over. And it's over. We move on.
Right.
So sometimes it's appropriate to say it, and sometimes you got to call a friend and just fucking say the shit.
Definitely. Because otherwise, if you hadn't, like in your mind still, you would be like, one thing I know about him is he's kind of a downer.
Or I would be kind of holding it against him. I'd have some hidden resentment towards him, and it'd be lingering where I'd be like, that still pisses me off. That's not good because I got that dingleberry in the back of my life,
Yeah, and again, you're damaging relationships. We're damaging relationships when we don't process these things, when we don't emotionally process all the way. And that's beautiful. Like it takes a little bit of courage if you're not used to saying things like that to your friends. But then what you find as you become more and more honest with your friends is that you're actually, this is me showing how much I care about you. This is me actually coming to you and talking to you because I trust you that I can have these kind of conversations. And then like the friendship goes, don't you think your friendship was enhanced from that conversation?
100%. And it's a unity thing, not a divisive thing. Like we don't have enough of that in this freaking world, right? So again, it's like, and this is the thing where, you just go, all right, that's it. I'm bailing without addressing, people just bail on stuff. It's like, you know what? But you're never going to come together. It's worth a shot anyway. Look, the conversation could maybe have worked out a different way where he was like, I wasn't at all that way. You're crazy. Maybe we could have, but it was a 2-second thing. And again, I talked to him in a certain way because he's my friend. So I'm able to go, dude, you're being a freaking downer right now. Like that was kind of lame. That's different. You may have to present it more diplomatically to someone else, but at the same time, either speak up. And if it's not appropriate, you got to speak up to someone else. And like you said, get it out. Get it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when we do have those conversations, so sometimes they might be in our head, right? Sometimes they might be written, but sometimes they're out loud. But when they are out loud, I think it's also important I just had an experience like this recently. Like I had to tell a friend, I'm like, I don't know why you keep doing this to me, but it feels really freaking rude. Like it feels really freaking rude. And he was like,
do you mind sharing what the thing was? Or
yeah, sure. He was
essence?
in conversation, he kept telling me to like hold on, like because he felt like I was interrupting him, and I was like, why is he telling me to do this all the time? Like it seemed really over the top, and I was like, I just told him, I'm like, it feels derogatory to me how you keep like shushing me, like, and he was like, wow, I'm really glad you brought that up because to me, it feels really rude because I'm trying to like be in the middle of a conversation and you keep interjecting. And I noticed in his patterns when he talks, he does not do that when he's listening. He just listens until you are like done. And so I realized, I was like, I get it. That is how he interacts. Me and my friends were like, do, right? And he's like, I'm sorry. He's like, I don't think it's, you're excited and that's how you communicate. I get that, but it just feels so different to me. And it feels like I can't finish my sentences because you're finishing it for me. And in that moment, I had to take this moment of understanding and receiving what he was telling me instead of me being like, I don't do that to nobody else has a problem with it. That's how I talk to all my friends and being justified and defending myself. I was like, okay, message received. To him, it is important that I let him completely finish a thought before I interject. Got it. I can do that for you. Right. And he also listened and was like, yeah, I get it. I understand that. I'll watch that. I can see how that might come off as rude to you. He's like, I didn't really know how else to do it. Like, I don't know how in a nice way to say like, will you please stop interrupting me all the time? You know? So it was cool because we both came to this place of mutual understanding where the other person was coming from instead of just having to be right the whole time.
Well, and how great on both sides. He speaks up about, hey, this is not good for me. And
Right.
you learned a little something about how to communicate with that particular person who needs a little something else. Because you and I are both like that, right? Like we'll be like, oh yeah, you know what I mean? And
Right.
by the way, for you know, sometimes, and you're a podcaster too, so you know, well, we both are, but so you understand this, which is the best way to do this is if like you're really tempted and this is a struggle of yours and you're on the phone with someone, you put that fucker on mute. Put it on mute while the other person is talking. And I guarantee you'll interrupt and then you'll realize, they didn't hear it. Great. And I'm going to let them finish. That's just a nice little dumb hack that everybody can do if you are dealing with one of these people or you know they're sensitive to that, or in general, you know that you do it all the time. That's really helped me, even as an interviewer, you know, just in general, like just putting it on mute sometimes, letting it go to its proper ending. And I think that makes me a better interviewer, but also too, I think it's also translated into my life to be a better listener because I'm like you and we get excited and you're talking, and some people aren't like that.
Exactly. And you're absolutely right. When my first few episodes of my podcast, I was like, oh my gosh, be quiet. Stop. So there's definitely truth in what he's saying, but conversationally with my friends, this is how we roll, right? But it's kind of a different ball game, one in interviews and two with certain personality types. And I think that was a really great example to me of like, not having to be right. Neither one of us were right. And that's not what it's about. It was us communicating what was important to us and understanding what the divide was there. Right. But if I had been triggered by it, like I could see myself coming home and be like, he's so rude. Like he like all the time is shushing me. What a jerk. You know, when in his perception, he's like, she's interrupting me all the time. What a jerk.
Aren't you glad you said something? Aren't you so
yeah.
glad? Because otherwise there'd be this weird resentment where now you're going to be like, don't patronize me, you mofo. Like when he was telling you to hold on.
Right.
Probably brought you closer. And now you know the rules of your communication game between the two of you.
Yep.
Clarity.
Yay.
Unity.
Communication for the win.
Right.
All right. The next question is, whatever thought you're having with this story that you've created, is it true? Right. And this comes from the work of Byron Katie. This is so important. And of course, at first you're going to feel like, yeah, it's true. Like she's a jerk and she always pulls me down every single time I'm around her. Right. And it usually goes into all these absolutes. And then the next question is, can you be absolutely certain without a shadow of a doubt, the truest of the truths from the universe that this story is true? And then you're like, okay, like I guess maybe technically not, right? That's where we start to turn, okay? That's where we start to turn when we can just crack the glass a little bit and let some other version of the story in. Okay, now what's important to know is also what emotions you're feeling as a result of the story. Where does that leave you? And then what emotions lead to actions? So what actions does that make you want to take? Not answer her phone call the next time she calls, or like talk bad about her to your friends? Like, is that energy you want to be in? Does that feel good? Do you like the energy and the actions that you're getting as a result of your story? And this is where we get into creator mode, right? This is where we start to create our own reality based off what we want. So the next question is, what do you want in this situation? Okay. So like for me, like, in that moment with my friend, it's like, I don't want him to keep shushing me. I like, okay.
And I don't want to feel patronized.
Yeah, exactly. So I want him to stop shushing me, and I don't want to feel patronized. Right. And so, then we go into, so what's the opposite version of the story, right? Instead of like, he always shushes me, it's like, I never shut up. Maybe is the opposite version. Okay. And then what's a third version? So we start to like pick apart different versions of the story. This is work. This takes us some cognitive effort. We got to work a brain muscle, right? So we got to sit here and think, okay, well, what's another positive? I don't know. Like, that's where we get, right? Like, I don't know. What's another possible story? Okay, let me think. Well, maybe like neither one of us. All right. Maybe, so you get into this third version, and then you choose which version of the story gets you what you want. Which one? Which version of the story gets you what? That's all that freaking matters. Because like we've all heard, I think we've all heard that, history is like never remembered the same twice. Like we remember an event differently every single time. And it's really just the story we've created about it that matters. Right?
It's just a perception.
It's just a perception thing. And so which story do you want to have in your mind that gets you what you want? Right? And so then you choose which version of the story you're going to believe. So for me, it was, like I finally came to the place of, when he talks, I need to not interrupt him because that's important to him. Now we both have what we want. And it was, guess what? As usual, it's all on me. That's what usually happens. I'm going to talk to him about never doing that to me again. Like that's okay. Try again. Try again. How can we be accountable in this situation? What shifts need to happen inside of us to get what we want? Maybe it is a situation in which it's like, dude, this is unsalvageable and I'm just not going to be around that person anymore because it's like nothing in me wants to be whatever. Sure. That's fine. Okay. But it's still your choice. It's still you choosing that. And I think when we want to control what other people do, when we live in this delusional state that we can control what other people do, that's when we become miserable. So it's choosing these triggers. These triggers are gifts. I always tell my clients, I'm like, oh, yay, a trigger. There's so much treasure there. Go find it. Go find the treasure. Yeah. Right. Because it's of course cruising along and everything's fine and dandy, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden you're pissed. Why? And there's so much treasure there. And if we can start to look at it like that, instead of just staying in our shit and being all stuck in it and being mad, we can be like, ooh, opportunity for growth, opportunity for advancement.
And
thank you, trigger.
Opportunity to stay in a positive, intentional, moving forward state versus victim-y, because it's what it is. And I kind of feel like triggers beget more triggers. So you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, you really gotta get rid of them as many as you can. Yep. But really, I think that the triggers are like, again, that one that I mentioned. It was a game changer in life for me, just all around. Like it was some of the biggest work I had to do. And it was really over this one consistent kind of trigger that would come up over time. I mean, I'm sure we've both worked on more than just one in our lifetime, but they're there. Some triggers too, like when you're feeling rejected, right? You're feeling abandoned, again, like the story of the chick with her friends. It's like fear of abandonment, fear that someone's going to leave you. These are all that when you're triggered like that, that's something to look at. Were you abandoned in your childhood? Did all your friends bail on you in some awful, coup in high school? Like, I don't know, what the story was.
Right. And you're looking for it all over the place to confirm to you that you were right about that story. And I have had this mess up relationships for me when people that I've dated haven't healed from these stories of like my
Yes.
mom didn't have enough time for me. And so now all of a sudden it's like this weird dynamic of like, oh, you don't have time for me. And I'm like, yes, I do. I have to do this other thing. But like, of course I want to be with you, and I'm like, I just see it coming up over and over and over again. And so when we fail to heal from these things and do the work on our own, man, it really dampens our quality of life. Like it
And also,
messes
we will
everything up.
trigger people. You'll be a triggerer. You'll be passive aggressive and weird about your stuff if you don't get rid of it. I'll give a
Yep.
good example that just came
True.
up. I remember, and this is
Triggerer.
this is a thing that I feel like I've come across a couple of times, and I get where it's coming from. I've had the experience where guys, dating or not, or you're in the dating process, and they're treading very lightly, or they'll say something like, they'll preface it with like, well, I don't want to like offend you, but because they think like women are sensitive and going to fly off the handle. Because again, that might be
Yeah.
their experience. That's their trigger of like
Right.
every time I
Right.
say something or like make a bad joke or make I'm going to offend some woman because they're all
Right.
sensitive, and that triggers me because I'm like, don't you? I'm like, don't you? Fucking tell me what kind of, because I'm like the least, like, right? Like, I'm like, you can say anything to me. Like, I have no feel when it comes to comedy. I
Yeah.
don't care how bad it is. I feel like everything can be joked about in the right context. So I don't get offended easily. So here I am offended by someone assuming I'm offended. And again, this has happened like a couple of times where I've had to be like,
Yeah.
what the? But sometimes you just call it out, or you just say like, hey, just so you know, like, there's really nothing you can say to offend me, and it'd have to be really, really, really crazy. Like it's just, don't worry
Right.
about it. Just be yourself. But again, so their triggers kind of triggering other people, or it goes both ways. But again, I think speaking up about it's important. But go ahead.
Exactly. I was going to say, you made me think of Catherine Dixon, who I work with on the Work of Byron Katie. She always talks about these things just being a kink in our hose. And when you were saying that about your triggers making you a triggerer, I'm thinking of a kinked hose, and it's like spraying water all wacky all over the place. Like that's how we are when we have that kink in our hose.
Yeah.
Instead of just being direct in our energy, we're like spraying all over the place, out of control, because we have a kink in our chain, right? And we're getting all over everybody else's business. And we know that because like there's a weirdness in the energy when somebody has an unhealed thing that's popping up all of a sudden. You're like, wait, what?
Yeah,
What's going
where
on
did this come
there? What's
from?
going on with you? Like, that felt weird, and it's usually a reflection of the own kink in our hose. So it is, we owe this to not only ourselves, of course. I mean, like, we don't want to have kinks in our hose. It makes us go down all these crazy paths that we don't need to be going down. It pulls us right out of alignment when we don't fix our own emotional issues. But then also it prohibits us from having good quality relationships with other people. So that's why, like, anytime, especially, I mean, my kids trigger me all the time. And you know what?
That's
I don't
par
know
for the course. You're a mom.
Yeah, I don't know there's no freaking way. Like, yeah, right. I don't believe any parent that doesn't say they haven't been triggered like crazy by their kids. But usually, you know what I find? Triggers me the most in my kids is when they're reflecting back to me something in myself that I am not at peace with.
Like, for example, do you have a one that you can think of?
Yeah. Like with my daughter, she tends to harp on her little brothers a lot. She's the oldest, and she has 3 little brothers. So we can all have a compassion for Mackenzie there.
I love that name.
They're very rambunctious, but like I've noticed, I'm like, gosh, Kens, like, why are you being so mean? Gosh, Kens. And then I notice myself, I'm like, Jerem, stop it. Kyle, stop. Micah, stop. Like,
You're doing the same thing.
She's learning from me. And I'm seeing reflected right back in my face something that I do that I'm not proud of, right? So kids all the time, the triggers that we see in kids, especially when they're your own kids, a lot of those habits that piss you off the most is because you don't like that about you, and they learned it from you, and it pisses you off that your kids are turning out in a way that you don't have peace at yourself with. So I see that all the time. I'm like, oh snap. Oh, that's me. They're just little mirrors. So they're kind of a gift that way. If you do have kids, they're kind of a gift to let you reflect back and see like, why is that triggering me? And I would say with kids, the first question is, do I see that in myself? Do I do that?
Well, like the example in one of those episodes, in one of our previous episodes where I talked about, what was it? God, I just lost my thought. Sorry, continue. I'll get it back.
Okay. I'll say another thing. I think I see this a lot with women and men too, but because I work with women, it's my face more, is body image issues. So I see this get triggered all over the place.
Yeah,
And in
how
a lot
do people
of
get
different
triggered?
ways.
Give us some examples of some things you've heard from the people who are getting triggered. Like, what are those little situations like?
So the first one is like if somebody makes a comment about like how much you're eating, or possibly maybe you feel sensitive about like going to the gym too much, and they say like, yeah, she's always in the gym, and now you've taken that as an insult instead of maybe a compliment. That you don't know their
Right.
intention. And even if it was an insult, why is it bothering you? If somebody tells me I'm in the gym too much, I'm like, they don't understand. Like, that's all. Like, it doesn't bother me. What if, maybe somebody will say like, hey,
Like,
you
you're
should
home
try.
too much. Fuck you.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. I don't need your opinion. What if somebody says like, maybe you should try keto? You should do keto with me. Oh, are you now offended, or is this something you can come together? Because if you're offended, it's probably your own perception that you don't like how you look, and you think, oh, and they don't like how I look either, right? And so this can cause a lot of relationship issues when we have woundedness in our own body image. Like, I see that happen all over the place. And the flip side of this is getting triggered by social media when we see other people happy and confident with their bodies. And these insults start coming out of like, oh my gosh, because that's because she doesn't spend time with her kids, like, or that's because she blah blah blah, or whatever it is. You getting those kind of thoughts in your head, you got some freaking work to do. So I think like I just wanted to
Well, I want
point
to talk
out
about the eating one for a second. So, because
Yeah.
I had this, and it was less of well, it was the person who had their own, they were projecting triggers. So the person had a lot of eating issues, and they were constantly making comments about, like, I would come out with, like, let's say like a big bowl of fruit and something, they'd be like, wow, you're going to eat all of that? Or comments like I'd eat a piece of bread and they'd be like, I thought you didn't eat grains. Or what, you
Right.
know what I mean? Okay, because I'm paleo. And finally, I was close enough to the person, I had a real come to Jesus with them. I said, you have to shut your mouth about food, period. Stop judging, stop talking, stop looking. I don't want one word or snide look out of your mouth. I go, I don't look at you waking up with your big bowl of oatmeal and a crap load of fruit, and then you're hungry 2 hours later. You don't see me lecturing you on carbohydrate dependency issues. So if I'm not going to lecture you, and I'm the health coach, then I don't want to hear a damn thing. I go, you're projecting that onto me because you have issues with food. You have issues. So when you see me with the big bowl, you're like, are you going to eat all that? And finally I was like, I'm not going to, it didn't make me feel bad about myself, but if anything, I was calling them out on like, hey man, that's not proper behavior. That's a projection of how you get triggered, because that's how they feel. And I guarantee you that if someone had said to them like, wow, are you going to eat all that? They would have been in defense mode, and they would have been...
Yeah.
And yet they're doing it to other people. And I'm like, stop it. If you don't want to be judged on your shit, then you need to shut about. And this is what would happen, because I was staying with these people for a few months. Then it would happen again, or I'd see a look and I go, up, nope, cut it. I saw that. Nope. Or they'd be like, oh, I go, what did we talk about? I just talked to you about this yesterday. Shut up. Are you seriously going to stop? Just cancel every comment and look that you have about your thoughts about what or how I'm eating. It could have been a bowl of meat. It didn't matter what it was. It was just general constant comment, like the tea. Just constant comment.
And she was reflecting what's happening in her head all day long, which if from your end, you had to set the boundary because you're like, this is really getting on my nerves. But also I think there's probably some compassion too, because you're like, oh my gosh, this is going through your head like all day, every day.
I totally get it. And I told them, I'm like, listen, I think you need to change the way or they would judge people. They'd be out there go, look how fat these people are. And I'm like, dude, you're the one that has the weight problem. Like, stop projecting onto these people. You know how hard the struggle is, man. You're in the struggle still right now, even though you're on Weight Watchers. So stop projecting. Yeah, so
it's all the self-talk. It's that self-talk is how, this is something that Catherine Dixon helped me with a lot too. She said, we go deep into the work, and she's like, how are you treating yourself when you say these things to yourself? And I thought I had the most positive self-talk in the world. If somebody was like, do you beat yourself up? I'd be like, no, like I never do that. Yeah, right. We all do that in certain scenarios. And so it's like we really hyper-focus at some area you have shame about or you're not proud of. And it's like, what were you telling yourself? And it's like, oh, I'm a mess. I'm unorganized. I don't stand up for myself. I'm weak. I'm, all this, whatever it is. And then she said, would you ever say that to somebody else? And I was like, no. And she goes, yes, you would. If you got comfortable and tired and exhausted and pushed to your wits end enough, you definitely would, because that's okay for you to talk like that. And so what this friend was doing is like, because she talks to herself like that, is it a woman? female friend, because she talks to herself like that all the time. She's comfortable talking to other people about this. And this is really key. This is a bit of a side note, but this is really, really key, because when you improve your own self-talk, it will change the relationships that you attract into your life. Because when people come, like, because I used to not have as good place with myself and self-talk, when guys would come and like neg me to flirt with me, or like kind of put me down to do that kind of flirting, I'd be like, ah, ha, ha. I was comfortable with it, right? Like, it's like just like makes me want to vomit now when I hear it. I'm just like, don't talk to me like that. Like, I don't talk to myself like that, so it's not okay with me when people talk to me like that. Like, I'll be rude. I'm not like, I mean, I'm not rude about it, but I've like noted it's like, I don't like that energy that much, whereas before I did like that energy because I was totally comfortable with it. So this, I mean, goes along with lines of the same thing as like all of these triggers that we're getting. She was getting triggered by you because here you are, this like health expert, and you're thin and you figured out your shit. And she's just like,
and I'm eating whatever the hell I want with no issues. And they're projecting.
Right. So she's triggered because she hasn't healed from her own stuff. So a lot of like triggers are a beautiful opportunity for healing if we're willing to dig into them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm trying to think of some more. God, there's so many like, and throughout life that have come up. But are there any more questions in there, or there's some more stuff
that's the nutshell. I mean,
then let's talk about, if you want to go run through a few examples. So it's just some people might need to look at in their life of some examples of some common triggers that I wrote down.
Okay.
Anniversary dates of losses or trauma. That can
yes,
write a date of someone's death, or of the date that you got raped, or what. I mean, these are real things. So a date coming up, and that could be.
And I'll say real quick on that one, like if they're suffering, it's because you're believing a story of suffering. You're believing some story that caused you to suffer. Like, I wasn't there for them enough, or I should have been nicer to them before they passed, or like if it's a broken relationship.
Or I shouldn't have walked down that dark alley. Oh my God, no. Right. No one deserves this. But then you need to heal the trauma, and you need to get out of your blaming yourself.
That story, yeah.
Also, even another trigger, just too much to do, feeling overwhelmed, That could be like a trigger for people. The end of a relationship. Clearly, any of those can be a major trigger for stuff.
Yeah.
Financial. This is a good one. So the person I was talking to have got their issues with food. They're great with money, and that was never my strong suit. I tried to avoid it. I was in denial about it. Don't want to look at it. It's still something I have to like actively work on, because I'd rather just be like, you do it. I don't fucking deal. I don't want to deal with it. Damn it. So I would ignore it. You know what I mean? Which, by the way, doesn't work out well with the IRS after a while. You're like, oh, I'm okay. So when they would say something to me like, you should really look at doing a budget, I would be like, just shut. Like, I would get so triggered. Triggered. But the truth is that why did I get triggered? Because I'm not dealing with my shit. Because I wasn't dealing with my shit, man. I just wasn't. And before this person sort of got onto an eating program, if I would say something like, you really should about their health, then they would be like, because that's not the area they're disciplined in. I happen to be very disciplined with like working out and all the stuff that, you're not, but they aren't. So they got triggered by that because that's their struggle. That's their thing they haven't dealt with, and I was getting triggered by their comments about, financially you should do this. You really got to do a budget or whatever. And I would just like have a brain meltdown and run and be so angry. And again, it's really because I don't feel good about the way I'm handling my finances. That's just the truth.
Right. Exactly.
It's me, man. It's me.
Right. Exactly. It's like you've already got a wound there and somebody just sprinkled a little bit of salt in it.
That's right. Redmond salt. Let's give them a shout out. Sprinkle some Redmond salt in there.
They put the good salt in there. Did you have any more on your list?
Let's see what else I was thinking about here. Family friction triggered, holidays, things like that, triggered by comments, family members. And by the way, this is just one of those things where this shit is probably going to happen. So you prepare yourself and you prepare to zip it. Because sometimes it's just better left unsaid at these kind of things. Let that dumb uncle just rant and rave about whatever's insane, and don't get pulled into a conversation.
Exactly. That's where meditation skills come in. It's just let it go. Just let it go.
Let them
just
have
let
that.
It go.
Let them
once
have
you start confirming it all in your mind, now you're caught back in that land of hell.
Right. So I guess I would also say like people get so they're draining. triggers are draining. It's
Yes.
such a drain of energy. It is putting you off, like you said, you're getting out of alignment.
Right.
And we probably have them everywhere. Like, again, people could be triggered by a news report. It doesn't matter. But, and again, we could be triggered in a proper way. Like we see some child being beaten on the streets. We're like, oh my God, everyone would be horrified. But also, too, are you extra triggered because you were beaten? I mean, maybe that could be a scenario, or maybe not. It could just be we're both horrified by something awful happening in the world. And that's not a trigger because we're not taking it personally. Do you know what I mean? But I think, yeah, I mean, I think this is just such important work. Are there any other, I know you mentioned 10, but are there any others that we want to throw in there? Or I guess, what about someone, can you share a story where someone had a trigger that you helped them release, without detailing too much personal information?
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to keep it as undetailed as possible as far for privacy. But we actually went through this whole process on a coaching call last week. And one of my sweet clients was so vulnerable and beautiful to go through an actual scenario in her life in front of everyone. I was so, so proud of her and so grateful, because it's a gift when we're vulnerable about things. Like when you were saying like finances are a trigger for me, I'm not confident in that. Like, that's so beautiful. Those are the moments that it's like, oh, I love you, Elle. I can so relate. Of course, we all have, like, I'm the same way, and we all have stuff like that. So it's like when someone can be vulnerable and open, it's such a gift. So she was just talking about somebody like coming into town and her feeling, when being around friends in social situations, her feeling almost like they are a threat to her being able to stay on point with her nutrition, right? And so and it's like, oh, they always want to do this, they always want to drink, they always want to go get all this food, and like it's dragging me down because I like to eat this way, and like they don't understand, and it became this very divisive thing. And what we came to at the end of that was just really truly that like she was giving the power outside of herself, that she can choose any of those things the entire time, and it's okay if she chooses to drink alcohol and go have freaking pizza and cheap Mexican burritos. Like, just know that you're choosing it, not them. They didn't do that to you.
They didn't force feed you.
Yeah, and you can do whatever you want, right? And it's saying within yourself there, that's where all the peace comes, right? And understanding that, it brings to mind another conversation I had with someone just yesterday talking about like the guilt. This is actually maybe a common one. The guilt that especially I feel like married people experience in taking time for themselves. Taking time to go to the gym when they have family and kids at home and they already work, and they're like, oh man, like how much selfish time am I going to take? And it's like, no. No, this is self-care, and they should also be able to have that. It should be encouraged in one another. Like, yes, baby, of course. Like, oh, take care of yourself. Right. And so, a lot of these triggers, I feel like we kind of almost use other people as excuses in a lot of ways. We're saying they're triggering me, they're doing this to me, they're not allowing. And it's like, no, you have the choice always. You have the choice always. But it's the story that we create around it of, I'm going to feel so bad if I don't. Well, it is them, because I'll feel guilty if everyone's drinking and I'm not. It's like, that's your choice.
That's you not being confident as fuck and being peer pressured, man. That's just,
right.
That's just you
and no
allowing yourself.
Right. And we all have these moments. Like, I'm not trying to say I don't, like, we all have these moments, but it's really worth taking a look when we feel like someone else is triggering us. Where are we turning the accountability onto them when it's really ours? Right. Mm-hmm. So, with this person I was talking to yesterday, I'm like, well, you work like 12 hours a day. You can't work 11 hours a day and go to the gym for an hour. Like, that's not your spouse's fault. that's your time management, And so these are the kind of conversations, because it takes you out of, I can't because of X, or I'm going to fail because of so-and-so, into accountability. And man, that's a beautiful energy to be in, because now it's like, it's not up to anyone else. And that is a bit of a victim mentality when we think that it's up to somebody else or up to circumstances to change how we choose our lives. Like, ooh, that's a low vibration energy to be in. It does not feel good. It feels extremely trapped and powerless. But when we get out of that, I heard a little side note. I heard a Holocaust victim tell her story. I listened to this woman for like 4 hours. It was so long, like on the edge of my seat because it was the most beautiful display of human courage and integrity I have ever heard. And she was in a concentration camp, and the whole time her mother displayed just holding on to who they really were despite their circumstances. It was like 4 hours of her just saying like, no, this is how we do it inside this system, but we still stay true to who we are. We still have integrity. We still we're not going to spit in the face or like be defiant or whatever, because that's not the kind of person I am. They're making bad choices. They're making choices right now that I don't think are good, but I'm not going to also do that. Right. And to continue to teach her daughter these lessons of high integrity, staying true to who she was in that kind of circumstance. So I'm like,
circumstance,
the worst, most powerless, trapped possible you could ever imagine in your life.
And she was still thought perspective was more important. That she knew, hey, we only have this. We're sitting here, we're trapped. So we got our minds, we got our emotions. Let's not let them take us down, even though they're actively trying to take us down.
Right. It's the concept of, if you can't change your circumstances, change your mind about your circumstances. I can't remember whose quote that is, but that's the power comes from within us. And I'd say if anybody's listening to this and they're like, okay, like how do I get there fast? Meditation. meditation. That is the fast route to understanding that all the power that you want in your life comes from inside of you. So I've noticed a tremendous, like, life-changing difference on how my self-worth, my power, my choices, my everything coming from inside of me, it is from meditation. So that's fast track. I
agree. And I just want to kick back. I was thinking about something where had this experience with someone where they are not a person who ever does any self-reflection. They're like a non-malignant narcissist. They just, it's always everyone else's fault or whatever. Right. Okay. And so in any type of scenario where you point out something about them, right? Or if anyone, me or 10 other family members would point out something like, hey, this is a theme, or like, we've known you for 30 freaking years. Like, they would say something like, they would just fly off the handle and be like, why can't you just let me be me? Like, so if you keep hearing that, or you keep saying that, I would say this: do you like how you fucking are? Because that's exactly what I said to that person. I go, I don't think you even like who you're being. So don't even try to pull that as it, you know what I mean? So that's one of the, like, a common excuse. People just be like, why doesn't everyone just like, let me be me, accept me for me? It's like, I don't think you even accept you for you, because you wouldn't be so damn freaking triggered by these comments that keep coming to you. They are the same comment.
Nailed it. And that's the thing too, is like, are people really attacking you, or are they coming
trying to help you
in love and trying to help you?
And
you're feeling attacked. That's something to really, really look at. Right. And you can tell by people's tone when somebody comes to you in calmness and they're saying, hey, look, like, I'm trying to tell you, this is how I feel. This is what I see. That's an extreme act of love, in my opinion. That's an extreme. They don't have to do that. They don't have to tell you that. They can just think you're an a-hole.
And they know they might start a thing that's not positive, so they're doing it anyway because they care.
They care, right? And then you're saying like, why are you always attacking me? It's like, oh, they're always criticizing me, or they're always, it's like, no. They are actually showing you love right now by trying to do something, even though they know you're going to fly off the handle like this. They really, really care. And that's what I've always tell people when they get offended at something I say. I'm like, listen, I could have easily just not cared enough to say this to you. Like, I got a lot going on in my life.
Yeah, like this is the last thing I freaking need.
Yeah, I'm like, I've got 4 kids and a business and a bunch of clients and podcasts and like so much freaking going on in my life. Like, the fact that I'm taking out brain space to care enough to come have this difficult conversation with you, like, please understand that this is coming in love. Like, otherwise, I don't care. I don't like drama. I don't like gossip. When people gossiping to me, I'm like, holy shit, I don't have time to care about what other people got going on unless it's like really important, affects my life somehow. Otherwise, like, why are we so concerned about what's happening in somebody else's life? Because we're not concerned about what's happening in our own. You know what I mean? So that's why, like, for me, I think that all the COVID and all the racism stuff that's out right now, like, has really, it's blindsided me a little bit because I don't watch the news at all. at all, because the news contributes to this kind of mentality to me of like being so involved in something else that you're not focusing on your own life. So I got kind of
It is a distraction. It can be a distraction, and also
Right.
it's usually not positive.
Right, right. I'm not saying it's bad too. I just don't, because I'm so busy, like I've just got so much going on. It's not a priority in my life right now just because I have some higher priorities. So I think, for me, it's just saying like when I come to you, if I take enough brain energy out of my busy life to like say, hey, I noticed this thing and I feel like it might be hurting you and I'm not coming at you hard. It's like, man, please receive that in love. You know what I mean? And I hope always when somebody comes at me like that, I'm like, wow. Okay. And it's usually that paradigm shift moment because you're not seeing it. We all have blind spots, but it's like allowing that paradigm shift instead of the deflection, instead of the fight, instead of the like, no, that's your perception. Like, I'm like this. It's like, dude, they care or they wouldn't have said anything. So it's like taking that moment where you paradigm shift of like, hold on, let me see it from their perspective. Oh, holy shit. Okay. Yeah, I could see how they could see it like that. That's a growth moment. That's a gift. Like tell the person thank you, instead of dismissing.
Yeah, and Byron Katie, defense, defense is the first act of war. Anytime you immediately try to defend. So you could always be like, even though you might be triggered by this moment, you can always be like, all right, I appreciate that was probably tough for you to say. Let's get into it. Let's talk about it a little bit. The other thing too is, so here's what would be a trigger, like if, let's say we're talking or whatever, I don't know, someone does something and you would say something like, oh, someone's triggered. Don't ever do that, people. Don't ever present something in that way, because that would trigger me even if I didn't have a trigger. I'd be like, what? Now you just triggered me where I didn't have a trigger. It's like this. It's like when people, let's say someone like exhibits a little bit of mad mood and someone goes, someone woke up on the wrong side of the bed. No, I didn't until you just said that. Now I'm on the wrong side of the bed. Right?
Exactly.
So don't let people gaslight you either. I had, I did, because gaslighting, if, I was gaslighted once about my disability from a guy I was dating. It was really horrible because he made me feel like I had this like serious, like you need deep therapy, and I had already done all this work. Like I was like, and again, I wasn't even triggered by it. Where I did go through the work. I was up and honest, but they kind of like at me with it. They were, and I learned later they literally were a gaslighter. So again, you have to use discernment when you're dealing with what people are coming from, and don't get gaslighted on it either, because you may not have a trigger. Someone's trying to project one onto you, but for the most part, I find that anything that makes us feel triggered, and it could be anything. It could be like a phone conversation with a friend and you disagree with what they're doing with their life, and you're triggered because it's against a belief you have. I talked about it with my friend who didn't have insurance, and I believe in insurance, and I was she's crazy. What is she thinking? And then, I realized like she has different belief system than I am. Here I am all jacked up in my day now, all offended because someone
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot lately because I had mentioned something on my social media about masks, about wearing masks, and somebody got really triggered and wrote me this like really,
you don't care about people, right? Yep.
Right, with lots of swear words and all this stuff, and like, and then somebody else wrote me. She's like, I don't really agree with you, but like I would never say that to you, and I'm like, exactly, like I don't, you don't have to agree with me, and I know like a lot of my friends have different opinions than me, and like I'm not like I don't want to be their friend anymore, or I need to attack them. So I was really thinking about this. I'm like, what makes it so that we feel like attacked when somebody else has a different opinion than us? And I think it's a false belief that we have to agree with people, right? Like we have this weird thing that like, no, we all have to agree. Or somehow I think it's also a perceived, it's like a little bit of weakness. Like you feel a little bit of weakness in who you are and in your own ability to make opinions, so that when somebody else shares theirs, it now feels like a threat to yours. Because I've had other people have totally different opinions on like the racism issues, and also the, like I found out one of my friends is like a major Trump supporter, and I don't really have opinion on any of that, but I was just kind of like, oh, okay, like he's a Trump supporter. Okay, like I just learned something about him. I don't know, like it wasn't like a trigger for me. It's just like, okay, noted, like that's how he feels or that's how she feels.
But it would have been a trigger for someone who was like attentive to the news and on the other side, where you're sort of neutral within it because you're not in that game.
Mm-hmm.
You're not choosing to participate in that world on a regular basis, other than the general knowledge you might need about an earthquake happening in your area or whatever. And so again, like you're not fired up, so that when someone says, oh, and you find out something about them, Trump supporter or not. Could be they were a Hillary fan, whatever. It doesn't even matter. You're just not triggered by it because you don't have any emotional investment in this scenario.
Right.
You've chosen not to.
Whereas I was a bit triggered by being forced to wear a mask, right? And that might be some own work needing to be done on my part about, because like I thought about this the other day, because my number one value is freedom, right? And I was like, why is that my number one value? What's up with that? You know, is there possibly some like old Mormon stories of like my freedom was taken away by, you know, it's like a little bit of an old victim story or something? Like I was really thinking about that. I was like, why did that trigger me? Like, why do I care? You know, why do I feel like I have to like make a stand about not wearing masks and not being forced to do stuff by the government? And like, what's going on there? You know, so
and interestingly enough, your trigger about it that prompted you to say something about it then triggered.
Yeah,
it's a domino trigger effect, is what. We've all been there, man. It's like not even, but it's funny how that works.
My hose kink sprayed all over the place.
Right.
It sprayed so hard it kinked other people's hoses.
That's right.
You know, it's like all these kinks come together. So yeah, I was thinking about that. It's like any trigger, it's any strong emotional attachment or strong emotional opinion. There's stuff there, you know, and it's worth looking at. So that's
you
what
might
I've kind
even
of
learn, even if you don't find something that needs to be corrected or dealt with or worked out, you still may learn something about yourself.
Understanding, self-understanding. Exactly. Yep.
No, I love this topic. And again, this is a time where a lot of people are being triggered. And I get it, because there's a lot of stuff out there right now that's triggering all of us, right? It really is. I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking of some of the images and things that have been displayed lately. And it's hard for all of us. It could trigger us back to just, again, like, man, like, when's the last time I thought about, like, slavery, you know, or whatever. And it triggered me too. I'm half Jewish. So some of this stuff triggered me because there's a lot of anti-Semitic stuff going on. And even though I am not religious in any way and I never got bar mitzvahed and everything, it's still in my blood. And I think about Nazi Germany back then. And I think, oh my God, these things trigger and lead you to places of remembering something you haven't thought about for a while. You know what I mean? That can just give us a new emotional state. That's all. It's not that it's something like I need to work on my religious background or whatever. It's so we're all getting triggered, and I think this is good because this is a time when we do need to look at those things. Like, why am I so triggered by that? Because I don't like it. Okay, well, is there something I could do about it? Is there another way I can be? Is there, it's just asking these questions, you know?
Yeah, there's a music artist that I am obsessed with, and her name is Fia. She's like from, I don't know, Denmark or Belgium or somewhere over there. It's Fia. Oh, if you're,
I know who you're talking about.
You know Fia?
Awesome.
That's my girl. I'm like, you say it all, Fia. Like, she always brings me back right into my heart. And one of her songs, she says, "Come back to love." And I was actually going for a walk, and I was all triggered about like a relationship that had ended. And I was like, ew, I don't like the way he was being about that. Ew, that's gross. Ew, he was trying to control me. Like, I was getting all worked up, right? And I was like, and of course those thoughts lead to actions. Like, I'm already starting to think like, I should freaking say something to him about that, you know, and I'm getting all up in my crap. And then Fia comes in my ear with, "Come back to love, come back to love." And like, at first I was like, no, this is not the time for love. And I'm like, whoa, think about that, you know? And so with all these triggers we're all experiencing, I guess I'll echo the words of Fia of come back to love. Do you come back to love at the end of your processing? Does it bring you back to a place of love? Because if it doesn't, you're off. I'm telling you, if it doesn't, you're off. You can find it again. I have examined that myself. That's like been an aha for me with the end of dating relationships. I feel like a lot of us do this. We look at all the negatives so we can break free emotionally from the love attachment that we had there, right? So it's like, I have to hate this and hate this and hate this and hate this. I examine that in myself with Mormonism too. It's like, I have to hate this, I have to hate this, I have to hate this, so I can break free from that attachment that I had. And I realized that's not right. That's not the way. Actually, if I can honor it and find all the beauty and honor all the things that I loved and focus on those things, now I don't have this huge resistance going on in my soul where I'm like, dude, I'm so glad. That came into my meditation this morning with Mormonism. It was like, man, imagine what your life could have been like if you didn't. Because I grew up really poor. Like, I feel like in a lot of ways, Mormonism was like this like outlet. It was this way for me to see another way of life in my little like poverty-stricken home that I lived in. Like, oh man, it was like, girl, you better start being grateful and seeing all the good that came from that in your life, right? And I think that with all the relationships I've had to, focusing on the good actually can get us to a place of peace and coming back to love. So I'd say, you know, like maybe in the triggers that we're all feeling right now with coronavirus and racism and all of these issues, it's like, what will help you come back to love here? examine that. And I think it triggers across the board. If you can get to a place like what's going to bring you back into this place of love vibration, that's the goal, right?
Yeah,
Because once you get there, you have peace.
Yeah, and I on this note, a post I did last week, which I think is I had to repost it because I felt it was important. When you're ready to declare or defend, be careful on the send.
Yeah.
We always look, you're gonna write that email, that contentious, that controversial post. Whoa, sit on it.
Right.
Maybe ask a friend. Wait, sleep on it. Be careful on the send, especially right now. This is a triggering time. Check yourself. Oftentimes when we go and look back, we're like, I could have said that better. Did I even need to say it at all? Damn.
Right.
Hello, editing, right? So sometimes we realize our initial approach was garbage. And because we're hot on it. We got triggered. Blah, blah, blah. So that I put that out again because I think that's important right now. We need to check ourselves. Again, look, we're on social media, but we're also, we've got friends. We've got lots of discussions going on with probably people that think differently than us. Woo! Let's just take a breather before you're about to send an email, send a text, do a post that you might think could trigger someone, or you're triggered and then you're sending it like I'm telling you, the domino effect is what's going to happen. You're just going to get a bunch of backlash. So I think that's always a good reminder too that I just wanted to throw out there.
Yeah, such good advice. I think I was laughing to myself because I'm like, why do we always feel like we're so brilliant when we're triggered? I've got all these great thoughts that the world just needs to hear. I think it's us just trying to confirm to ourselves that we're right. And let me give it out to other people.
It's ego being like, go with it. Yeah, go with it. Attack. Yeah.
Make sure some people agree with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, really interesting. And that's great advice. All right, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up on triggers. And thanks guys for joining us. I hope you guys are enjoying these. Please come visit us on kickasslifepodcast.com. You can submit topic requests there, and you can also see all the listening platforms. If you're listening to us on audio, make sure that you know that we're also on YouTube. So just throw us on your laptop or iPad or whatever while you're cooking and come join the show because I don't know. I don't know about you, but I love video versions of podcasts. I feel like podcasts. It helps me get to know people better. So
yeah.
Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you guys again next week.
Bye, everyone.